Well, thank you so much, Brittany, for joining me today. I'm super excited to talk about AidKit. And anytime I hear technology and infrastructure and international development or some kind of impact, because a lot parts of the world has not been touched by like high end technology like they should be, and so I know it could solve a lot of issues and problems. So very excited to talk about AidKit and the product and infrastructure that you guys are building. Before we get into that, talk a little bit about your journey. What was your path and what led you to become CEO at AidKit?
Yeah. Hey, Grant, thanks for having me. It's good to be on your show. Um, I Going back to college, I guess that's a good place to start. Yeah, I studied applied math at a little liberal arts school in Montana, Carroll College. Shout out to the Saints. It's an awesome school.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I did my math degree there. One of the things that I found, like, pretty early on is that I really love working with super technical people, and I'm really good at kind of helping communicate technical information. So, we used to do, like, mathematical, modeling, contests and, like, operations research contests and, these small teams, and we were really successful in a lot of cases. So that, like, kind of emerged as an early superpower that I discovered. From there, I wasn't exactly sure, like, what I ultimately wanted to do, but I knew there was some kind of impact angle, and what that looked like early on was farming. I actually got involved
Okay.
in an organic vegetable farm, and my role was as operations manager. So what that looked like in practice was actually leveraging technology to help the organic food reach more people. So build some tech-enabled systems to do, like, community-supported agriculture, but digitally enabled. And, that helped scale that from about 35 members to a statewide CSA program with about 900 families. It
Wow.
was super fun. And eventually I kind of got to this point where I wanted to help a lot more people, not just, middle and high income people access that kind of high quality food. So I took a role as a executive director of a nonprofit called ADK Action, and I got to do a lot of, like, community development work and food access work there, and that included doing some cool stuff with tech where we were providing access to, local food from a variety of different farms with SNAP benefits. So
Hmm.
people use their public
Yeah.
benefit money
Yeah.
in a tech-enabled way to be able to access food and have it delivered to their door. So we actually unlocked, like, the first pilot for a local community. It was Amazon, Walmart, and then our little project in New York, for, like, the only vendors that could accept Snap Online for a time. And that was a pretty cool moment because a lot of, the families in the 6 million acre Adirondack Park that I was serving, couldn't get to grocery stores because it's a bunch of food deserts, but then add the pandemic on top of that, plus an aging
Yeah.
population, and getting food delivered to your home was, like, a key unlock for helping people get through that hard time. So that's kind of, I've kind of always brought this tech-enabled lens to all the roles that I've had. And, after the pandemic, I was really just, wide open. My eyes were wide open, I should say, to, like, how economic in nature all of these challenges were. That, like, the challenges of the food system, they weren't really food system challenges as much as
Mm.
they economic injustices that caused the symptoms downstream to be, lack of access to healthy food and, like, broken supply chains for local farms. So that's how I found AidKit. I found the founders had posted a job during the pandemic for, like, a director of partnerships, and it looked really cool and interesting. So I applied and joined as the sixth member of the team here.
Wow. So for those who don't know what AidKit is, what's the overall summary, the mission and vision? What's its purpose? What does it do?
Yeah, yeah. So, from number 6 to now there's 60 of us across the country. We're getting big, and we're doing a lot of really cool work. We're a public benefit corporation, so we're a tech company, but we're a tech company with a social mission, and our mission is to deliver aid with dignity. So we help people get access to things like emergency relief, cash assistance, public benefits. Basically, we close the gap between people who are eligible for programs and the people who actually receive access to those programs.
Give us an idea of how that looks, maybe even, domestically or internationally. Not case studies, but just examples of how it works in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our partners currently that's, really doing amazing work is Save the Children. And they're an international NGO, and they help children, as you would expect from their name. But especially they help families kind of weather the storm when emergencies and disasters strike. And so we built the infrastructure for them to be able to respond to domestic disasters in the US and be able to quickly get money in the hands of families with young children who qualify. So, think Hurricane Helene, Hurricane Milton, the floods in Washington, just, this past December. We're working with them to, provide those application links that are multilingual and then
Mhm.
all of the eligibility verification on the back end to make sure there's no fraud, make sure that folks really are eligible, and then getting payments out quickly. Um,
Wow.
and that looks like, standing up programs in like 4 to 6 hours and having money in people's pockets like less than a day and a half after they apply, and that feels really satisfying.
Yeah, that's great. So is it a mobile infrastructure on the end user side? Would they download like a Save the Children app? Just we'll stay on this one for now. But would they download AidKit app or would they download Save the Children app and you guys are sort of just in the back end infrastructure? They don't ever really need to understand or know who AidKit is. They're just interacting with Save the Children.
Yeah, so we put our partners first. So it's, these programs are Save the Children's programs. We're just their infrastructure on the back end, but we don't require any apps to be downloaded. What we do is a progressive web app. So
Okay.
basically in your browser, they go to a
Yeah.
URL and that way folks can get it on any device, always mobile first because that's how most people do like to apply these days. But yeah, progressive web apps.
Yeah, that's amazing. There's so many different dynamics that go into emergency relief. There's food, there's shelter, there's usually several different organizations. Maybe Save the Children, but also FEMA could be involved, or internationally, there's obviously other UN and there's other aid groups. There's a lot of moving parts. I guess so. So when AidKit comes in, do you always build custom software for the needs of Save the Children or other examples, or is there sort of a baseline infrastructure that any organization can go in and use and build themselves based off what their needs are?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Grant, because I think that that's a pretty significant nuance in our space. So, just like a simple SaaS platform really doesn't work in this use case because every single community is different.
Mhm.
And that's one of our like top design principles is that we make technology that works for communities. We don't make communities bend to work with our technology.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's not a SaaS platform, but what it is it's essentially like a set of building blocks, a domain specific language to get a little bit technical. And basically, we're able to leverage the same code base, which is in our functional layer. And then we have a definition layer on top of that. So without kind of rewriting code every time, we're able to quickly customize instances for each new partner. So that way they get something that truly solves their problems, meets their needs, and can be informed by their community so that it's totally attuned to the situation. So they can have a lot of customization, but we can still do it really fast and a lot more affordably than a like custom coded product. So we're trying to, give our partners their cake and let them eat it too.
That's huge. What's been some of the difficulties in dealing with the NGO space? Again, we're dealing with nonprofits or governments or, again, just individuals on there's a lot of moving parts, not in any situation, especially building like tech for this sector. What's been, I guess, what was V1? Like, what did AidKit walk into and look at? What was there before? And then I guess what has it looked at and say, okay, we can improve these dynamics across, like you said, we don't want to rebuild everything from scratch. So we want to build foundational infrastructure that could work across different impact sectors, but also enable the customization layer. But what was it like coming into that? What was in the market before AidKit?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's kind of like these two different levels. There's like the in the moment response, which is like a pandemic relief or disaster relief or like some kind of emergency program where things have to happen really fast. And what we've seen a lot in those situations is that like the status quo was basically like finding some kind of card issuer.
Hmm.
Piece, and then otherwise, like, working in, like, Google Docs, Google Sheets, and even, like, putting together, like, a type form or some kind of, just application. It could just be, like, a Google form
Sure.
even. So
Yeah.
people apply through this, like, generic form that doesn't have, like, really
Hmm.
strong data privacy, and then it kinda gets, just ported into, like, a big bucket on the back end where folks have to use spreadsheets and kinda
Hmm.
manually work through verifications, follow up with people in emails or, like, on a personal cell phone, and then, yeah, like, issue all these cards. And it's just, like, a really slow, disconnected process that is not generally multilingual, not generally up to accessibility standards, and also really prone to fraud. And so, creating infrastructure that can be spun up super quickly to meet the need, but that has all of those compliance and regulatory considerations in place, and also just an excellent user experience in place is kind of what we've brought to that space. Now, you asked about challenges to start, and I think the challenge is no doubt that things are busy and crazy all the time. And so it's hard to get people to think proactively about a disaster. And
Mm,
be hard to connect with the people who are like the community-based organizations or the government entities that are responding once the disaster, has already hit. So, the way that we approach that is we try to make relationships with those entities that always show up. The community foundations, the United Ways, the local
yeah.
county workforce offices, the local county HHS offices, because we want them to know us before the thing happens so that we are ready to work together immediately and they can get way, way better results. But yeah, it's hard to get attention when there's not the disaster, to get them to be interested enough to kind of
Sure.
sign up and lean in. But increasingly we're finding that more and more jurisdictions are really psyched about being prepared because we've all lived through, even in the last 5 years, so many different disruptions that we know we need to have that in place as a society.
What's another use case, real world use case besides disaster relief? I mentioned that just because Save the Children's usually that's sort of where they play a little bit in some of the things they do. But even like domestically, like what are some of the use cases that AidKit can providing right now, whether it's to governments or working with large organizations here domestically? What does that look like?
Yeah. So the other big space we've been really active in is maternal and infant health care.
Mm,
So there are massive health disparities among different racial groups and also different zip codes. It's like where you're pregnant really can
sure.
determine a lot of the outcomes in this country. So we found that there's an increasing number of organizations and state agencies that are working together to bring cash to moms when they're pregnant and for those early years of the child's life. So there's been an incredible amount of research just showing how impactful it is, both for brain development for the babies, but also for things like reducing CPS involvement. So families can stay together because the income hit that women take when they get pregnant is really significant and
Right.
it's a hard financial shock to bounce back from. So yeah, we've been helping folks. We've got these great partners in Michigan State, Give Directly, and Give Directly is
Yeah.
the administrator of a program called RX Kids, which was founded by Dr. Mona Hanna and Luke Schaefer at MSU, Michigan State University. And so that program gives the pregnant moms $1,500 dollars during their pregnancy and then $500 a month for the year after. And the results have been so incredible that Michigan actually passed a bill to create a statewide program to bring that to moms and babies all over the state. So, yeah, that's another example of the kind of work we do. There's also programs that are targeted for specific groups like Pacific Islanders and Indigenous mamas in the Seattle area called the Nest Guaranteed Income Program that we work on. So, yeah, those are a really lovely kind of cluster of programs that we get to support as well.
So you're kind of sitting in a interesting spot where you can make government more efficient in distributing capital, let's say.
Yeah.
Like they're already allocating it in a way, right? But maybe it's in a very legacy way. And maybe AKID steps in to build a modern infrastructure where governments can be way more efficient, less waste, less fraud by using modern tech to work on the ground with these organizations, but it's at a state level, which is very difficult to do. But you guys kind of bridge that gap between local organizations can have modern technology to work with governments at in a really interesting way and pace to save money across the board for taxpayers and for the people on the ground that really can get it. But the eliminating fraud part is huge because I think that's sort of think of direct cash investments, right? I think a lot of people get very weary of that ideology because of there could be fraud or the data could be say something, but in this way, you know there's so much sort of direct impact and it's pretty obvious, and so that layer is like unbelievably important and kind of helps on every single level across every state. It could at least.
Grant, that's awesome. I don't know if you're looking for a job, but you just did a great job articulating what we could bring to the space. And
Well, I get a little nerdy with the tech stuff, and so if we if we go back to the card thing we said, whether it's internationally, even domestically, if there's sort of payments and issuing stuff, is that working with like Stripe's API with their issuing card or something like that, or their KYC sort of infrastructure where you can bundle that with your proprietary tech and code? Is that how you're using some of these things that to make it dynamic?
That's a great question. So yeah, we do have payment partners. Stripe is not one of them, but we work with a handful of different folks on the rails, whether that's like, RTP, like banks that offer RTPs, really like fintech companies that are
Yep.
kind of layers down. So we have real-time payments through some of our partners, ACH, direct deposit, physical checks, debit cards, virtual cards. So it's a
Yep.
bunch different payment partners, and kind of our philosophy is that, I mean, really what we've seen in practice is that every community kind of has a different makeup. And sometimes you have communities where there's a lot of folks that don't have a bank account, and so they need virtual cards, they want it sent to their phone. And sometimes you have folks who, like, don't have a stable address, and so they need to go pick up a card from a local community-based organization on the ground. So anyhow, we keep a stacked bench of payment partners so that we can respond with the right payment mechanism for each community and negotiate great pricing so we can pass
Yeah.
along savings. So the vast majority of our kind of differentiation and value is our end-to-end tech stack, and it really our proprietary eligibility engine is the big thing. Figuring out, just like you said, the fraud control is so key. And it's also the accessibility. Basically, if you want to make sure people that need it the most can get in the door
Yeah.
and people
Yeah.
who don't qualify cannot, you have to hold the keys to that door. So that's our special sauce is we know how,
Huge.
it's there's no black boxes, like, we are the ones that can have all the visibility. Even while we're doing identity verification and income verification, we're able to make sure that we're kind of creating barriers for the people that we wanna keep out, not the people we wanna let in.
Yeah. How has the maturation of AI either positively affected the organization and what you can build and vice versa, like being the layer that, handles not handles fraud, but has to figure it out. I guess, do you see that becoming maybe more difficult to to identify with AI, but
Yeah.
or, you guys are building much more powerful platform with the detection layer that could kind of be a positive. I guess,
Yeah, yeah.
I have to ask the AI question just because it's top of mind and it's here and it's coming.
Absolutely. I mean, one of our principles is that, like, we wanna bring the tech superpowers of the Silicon Valley to the social sector. So, of
Yes.
course, we are thinking a lot about AI. We do have a bunch of engineers on our team, all domestic engineers that are full-time employees at AidKit, and they do use AI, they use Claude Code, they use, the most modern tools. At the same time, we negotiate 0 data retention policies, and we never put applicant data through AI. We've really kind of been careful and stringent about our use cases to kind of get all the benefits that we can for efficiency without having any of the like risks and downsides, or at
Yeah.
least minimizing those. You're right to say that fraud vectors increase significantly with AI. You can go into AI tooling and you can say, "Hey, make me a fake ID that says I'm this age and I live in this place," and you can try to fake residency for one of
Yeah.
these applications. And so it's really kind of created this situation where the urgency for, especially for government partners, should be really, really high because it's so easy to create false documents at scale now with AI that
Mm,
people can, get into programs that they shouldn't have any place in. And a lot of these legacy vendors are like large consulting firms that move at a glacial pace.
yeah.
And so, like, the AI fraud vectors are coming in hot and they're just not able to keep up. So in that way, like, not only does the AI help you create those fake documents if that's what you wanna do, the AI can also help you detect those fake documents if that's what you wanna do,
Yeah.
and so that's how we use it, is to identify and block, duplicates, to kind of do text extraction and figure out what's in the document, if it's the right kind of document, and if it has any signals for having been AI generated, for instance. So yeah, we're doing a lot in that regard on fraud control. We're also using AI for some pretty cool stuff, like helping people apply, like, fill out the forms themselves, because a lot of government application forms can be really confusing.
Yeah. No
So we're
doubt.
using an AI tool called Luna that actually kind of goes through the application with you, like a co-pilot. It's not just a chatbot, but it's like a co-pilot, so that as you're filling out the form, if you put in an answer that it knows probably isn't what they're looking for, it'll tell you in that moment, so you have a better chance of applying right one time and getting in
Gotcha.
instead of, like, facing delays later on. So it's kind of like a live, co-pilot navigator that gets people the help they need faster.
Love that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna read off a couple of statistics. So AidKit's active in 27 states, 600,000 platform end users, and working with 240 plus government nonprofit partners. I guess what have you learned across, working with this many government and nonprofit partners? I guess do you see people like feeling invigorated about the possibilities of it just feels like government and nonprofits for some reason has been very reluctant to like gravitate toward tech and modernizing in a lot of different ways. Do you see that changing? And do you see, maybe it's a younger generation coming into government or taking over, nonprofits as executive directors that they're a little bit more tech native and they understand how to use these things a lot better. But I guess what has the feedback been from you when you walk in the door and talk about AidKit to governments and nonprofits these days? What's that been like?
Yeah. So I would say the behavior is really different at the nonprofit level than at the government level. So what we've found is that nonprofits are really interested in using modern tech and always on the lookout for like the right and the best tools that they can gain access to. I think that their, budgets can be really tight in the nonprofit sector. So I think there's also anything that a nonprofit thinks it can do itself, like ad hoc with the
Mhm.
tools they're gonna always tend towards the lean side, which is super smart, and one of the things we do is we're just, really honest with our potential partners, and we tell them, "Hey, like, here's a certain scale that you might hit, and then find it's overwhelming to do this manually, and that's when we can come in and we can help you make it more efficient, and also, if you are serving, more than a couple hundred people, you're gonna have bigger risks that you're facing, like fraud, like being compliant with accessibility regulations in your area." So, yeah, we see it more as like a consultation and we kinda help them understand, "Hey, here are some great program designs you might wanna try. Here's when you'll be big enough for AidKit. Here are some options you can do that are like lower tech if you are doing something small."
Mhm.
But we find that the larger nonprofits, like, they generally have a bit of bureaucracy. They've got a couple of layers of, like, they gotta work with their board, and they've gotta get approval for their finance committee and all this stuff to be able to work with you. But generally, the value is pretty clear, and they're excited to better serve their communities. And we also are really efficient, so we're able to help them be more efficient, which is something nonprofits are constantly striving for.
It seems like as we're talking, and it seems like a great case is like is with like a state or local government where they have to, grant certain money or they have to do some of these things they were elected for. It seems like kids actually create a really interesting opportunity for actually like governments and even like politicians to like deliver on what they campaigned on because now it's possible, right? To what you mentioned, sort of RX kids or any of these baby bonds that I was looking at, or any type of pilot program that a state or local government wants to do, they can kind of do that pretty rapidly, get data back pretty soon,
Yep.
and in 12 to 18 months, kind of say, hey, this is working with this is not, let's change it up and do something different. But the tech, as we're talking through it, feels like it's there that it can enable a lot of governments to be a lot more efficient, less fraud, less waste, more
Yeah.
impact. Like that seems to work at every level, no matter what side of the aisle you might be on.
I think that's exactly right, and we definitely do see government partners doing just that. It's like you wanna pilot a new idea, you wanna show something that's possible, you wanna make a change in your community, whether that's, cash assistance to help people with the affordability crisis. We know affordability is such a big issue right now. Mamdani and so many others are really embracing this platform of affordability. Or if the thing you wanna do is stop fraud, waste, and abuse because you're finding, that taxpayers are entrusting government with their funds and they want to make sure that they go to the intended use, well, we can help you with that as well. Even if it's an existing program that's already running, we can get in there and we can build you a system that keeps the fraud out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it really is. There's something for everyone. And I think that it's kind of uniting in that way, and that we all want our tax dollars and the politicians want to be able to leverage tax money in a way that actually helps people. Yeah, we definitely make that possible.
I'll end on a couple questions here. Um, as a CEO and kind of, running a company, what are some of the lessons learned from the CEO point of view in that chair that, you have learned over the last few years that you could share maybe some tips or advice for aspiring CEOs coming up in the impact sector, they're building again, you're a for profit, right? So there's just a different atmosphere that you sort of, deal with. There's just a different way that you have to move forward in the things that you do. So what are things that you've learned the last few years?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing for me is just like, just be genuinely curious about solving interesting problems. I think that's the best career advice.
Mm,
Because there's always a way. Like, you don't have to
mm.
come in as an expert. Like, if there's a problem that generally keeps you up at night that you wanna work on, that you wanna solve, if you don't have the answers, talk to people until you figure it out together, bring the right people on the team, do your research. Like, when you're focused on solving problems, it almost always leads to really good outcomes versus, like, when the goal is to get a certain title or to, like, grow to a certain revenue size, those are almost secondary goals to, like, being effective. So I think having a North Star that, like, really points to what it is that you wanna change in the world will kind of help everything else fall into place.
Has AidKit raised rounds in its
We
history?
did raise the Series A in
Okay.
2024. Yeah, we were
Okay.
actually
How was
bootstrapped.
that?
It was good, it was fun. That's maybe weird to say, but I had a blast doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we were bootstrapped and profitable the first 4 years, so that certainly helps,
that helps.
we have
Yeah.
a great track record. Part of the reason we're able to have that track record is because some of our co-founders didn't take a salary at first.
Mm,
Fantastically talented and able to kind of contribute their sweat equity to get
yep.
us over that profitability line early, so don't I never take that for granted. And then, I come from the nonprofit world before this, and one thing I love about being in the for-profit world is you either created the value that someone's gonna pay for or you didn't. And to
Mm,
me, that creates, like, a certain gravity that just it's very clear. Whereas in the nonprofit world, sometimes I struggled with the fact that you kinda had to sell a concept to donors, but then the value you're creating is actually for the community you're serving, so it can be a little bit indirect. It's a wonderful model. Nonprofits are incredible. I love them. All so we have so many partners that are nonprofits, but that was the big shift for me as a tech CEO is like, okay, well, if we're not creating value for our customers, then it's not gonna work, and so that's very clarifying. So, yeah, we had a track record of creating extraordinary value, and when we raised the Series A, it was a really tight process. We had a lot of interest, and we were able to do it pretty quickly.
Last question I have is just a little bit about the future. What do the next 3 to 5 years look like? What are some of the goals and successes you and the team would like to achieve?
Yeah. I mean, it's been a wild past 12 months for aid. USAID really being dismantled last January. FEMA is very much up in the air right now. HR 1 bill that passed really reduced benefits access for millions of Americans for their health insurance, for their food benefits. So it's kind of a rebuilding and reassessing time. We want to create alternative systems that are all the things you and I talked about already: faster, more fraud resilient, more accessible. And we think that with all this kind of disruption that's happening in the aid sector, now is the perfect time to get better, more modern systems in place with AidKit. So, right now we're serving hundreds of thousands of people. In the next 5 years, we want to be serving millions or even tens of millions of people. We've delivered 400 million in aid. We want to cross that billion mark and then some. We really just want to make AidKit the go-to infrastructure for delivering safe, fast aid all across the country.
Love it. Last question, promise. What's the business model? Is it like a project-based thing where you build and sort of hand off? Or do you kinda build and then, there's sort of a retainer to kinda keep the technology going, updates, things like that? Just overall real quick.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. I mean, actually, it's a more interesting question than you might even realize because the status quo is consultants building with billable hours models.
Yep.
And we found that that might be actually one of the problems in the sector, why systems are so clunky and so complex and so slow. Because what you're really incentivizing the vendors to do is to increase complexity because they get
Yeah,
more money, right? So that's not how we work. We are on a more performance based fee schedule, so it's usage. So if they're not using us, if we're not actually delivering aid, they're not paying us. And then we do also have small licensing fees so that the platform improvements and especially like
sure.
the compliance side is maintained for them.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Brittany. This was great. Love what you and the team has built and is continuing to build. So best of luck for the next decade. Thanks.
Thank you, Grant. Great talking to you.